This video will show how to set up and fly an ILS approach with the new working title CJ4 update. If you haven't seen the video on programming the FMS, be sure to watch that first. The first step in doing an ILS approach in the working title CJ4 is selecting the approach. To do that, go to the Depart Arrive index by pressing the Depart Arrive key twice and selecting Arrive to the right of the destination. And from there, select ILS to runway 4 right. And then for the transition, we're going to select vectors as we did in the previous video, followed by pressing Execute. Once the approach is loaded into the FMS, the other thing it will do is automatically tune the localizer frequency, which can be seen with that white message at the bottom of the FMS. Loc will be tuned. That message is displayed 30 seconds prior to the localizer frequency being changed. A random frequency is placed to nav 1 and 2, but the localizer frequency 111.5 can be seen changing right there as soon as the message went out. Once that happens, if the localizer is being received, the localizer course will be entered automatically and ghost needles will be displayed. The cyan indications are not being flown and won't be flown unless the nav source is changed manually or one particular button is pressed, which will trigger nav to nav transfer. A new feature of this mod that the real aircraft will do is extending the final approach course. This is useful when getting radar vectors. Khadan intersection has been selected. All we're going to do is place that on the magenta line to go direct to it and then enter the final approach course of 047. This entry extends the final approach course from the selected fix and can be done when ATC starts giving radar vectors to final. The HSI is now displaying a course of 047 degrees. The airplane will now be able to intercept the final approach course if we're vectored 1 mile from Khadan or 20 miles from Khadan. But even if we get a tight vector and get vectored inside of Khadan intersection, that's okay too. The box will sequence all by itself. Look at where Khadan is on the FMS. As we pass the point perpendicular to Khadan, it's going to recognize that. It's going to put Khadan behind us in blue. Now SIT goes in front of us. That's still the final approach course. As the aircraft turns onto the final approach course after being vectored, you can see over on the PFD, we still have pink needles, meaning that's the FMS course, and also the cyan ghost needles, which is the localizer. It was stated earlier that nav to nav transfer, which is changing from FMS to localizer, won't happen automatically unless a button is pressed. And for that to happen on an ILS, the approach button must be pressed. And when the words cleared for the approach are heard, that's when approach can be selected. Here, approach mode has been selected, but we still have pink needles. Watch when the localizer gets about half scale deflection, which is about right there. It changes to green. Now in the PFD, we see Loc 1. We're now navigating off of the localizer. The glide slope deviation indicator is also displayed with a green diamond versus a magenta diamond previously for VNAV indications, which were being fed from the FMS. The other thing approach mode is going to do is enable the aircraft to intercept and follow the glide slope to the runway. GS or glide slope is armed and altitude is captured. When altitude is captured, in this situation, the missed approach altitude can be entered, which is 2,600 feet on this approach. Prior to glide slope intercept, which is about where we're at now, the aircraft should be configured for the approach, which in this case means gear down and full flaps. And the next altitude the aircraft will be flown to is decision altitude. When in approach mode and glide slope is captured, the autopilot will not honor the altitude selector, which is why the missed approach altitude of 2,600 feet has been entered. The missed approach altitude should be entered when the glide slope intercept altitude is captured. In this case, it was 2,400 feet, or by no later than when the glide slope is captured and the aircraft begins a descent onto the glide slope. If the runway isn't visible at the decision altitude, a climb to the missed approach altitude of 2,600 feet should be started. Let's say instead we land, taxi in, park at the FBO, and we want to get ready for the next flight, but we need to delete the old route. Here's an easy way to do that. Looking down at the FMS, Teterboro and Midway can still be seen as the origin and destination. The route we just flew is still in the FMS. The easy way to clear out the route is simply go to the flight plan page, under origin, type in your departure point. So in this case, it's going to be Chicago Midway. Completing that step will also clear the destination. And if a destination is now entered, we'll put KLAX for Los Angeles International, hit execute, and now go to the legs page, which is now empty, and the waypoints for the next route can be entered. That is how an ILS is set up and flown with a few variables added in. Thanks for watching and enjoy the CJ4.